This week, we're talking cold storage and quarterly hogs and pigs inventory. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update on Brownfield. I'm your host, Meghan Grebner. With us this week, as always, is livestock economist Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Meghan.
We'll dig into the details of those reports coming up in just a few minutes. But first, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Yeah, on the cattle side this week, a lot of positive with some higher prices. Live fed cattle were $2.10 higher this week. We saw those feeder cattle markets anywhere from steady to $2 higher on the week. On the future side, the October live cattle futures contract closed up $1.25, and the October feeder contract was up $3.45. That was despite what was a 16.25% increase in the October corn futures this week as well. On the beef side, choice box beef prices were down $2.95 this week. On the hog side, cash barrels and gilts down 40 cents. The October lean futures contract was down 25 cents, and the pork cutout value was actually unchanged on the week.
I talked to Tony Hancock at Missouri earlier this week, or earlier today, and I said kind of an unexpected week on the cattle side of things, and that really has been a nice surprise after what was a few weeks of sluggish business to see this little bit of a bounce or this little bit of a climb higher.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess I look at what's going on, and lower box beef prices and higher cattle prices certainly put packers, I think, in the crosshairs after what had been a few weeks of better returns for them. And I think that's the thing we'll have to watch going forward is just where we see choice box beef going as we look ahead the next several weeks.
All right, let's take a look at the slaughter numbers. How did things stack up this week?
Yeah, so USDA tells us for the week ending September 28th, a run of 612,000 head of cattle, which is probably more than we anticipated when we started the week. That's 2,000 more than we did last week and is unchanged from what we did last year. On the hog side, hog slaughter this week, 2.569 million head of hogs slaughtered. That's 63,000 more than we did last week, but 48,000 less than we did last year.
And as we take a look at those numbers year over year.
So we're down 3.9% in terms of cattle slaughter now year to date, and up 1.2% in terms of hog slaughter.
Kind of a quiet week for us in terms of reports when we think about it in terms of volume. Cold storage numbers out earlier this week. As you take a look at those, any surprises for you?
Probably not a lot of surprises. I kind of look at what we got out of cold storage and I say you have to be positive about it. When you look at, and sometimes I like to look across the board here. So beef, pork, chicken, and turkey ending stocks, all four for a change. They were down 3.8% August of this year relative to August of last year, down nearly 13%. Relative to the 2018 through 2022 August average. So stocks are not burdensome by any stretch when you look at the report. If we look briefly here at beef and pork, so beef ending stocks at 395 million pounds for August of this year. That was down just 0.1% relative to 2023's level, but again down 16% relative to the 2018 to 2022 average. And on the pork side, 454 million pounds of pork in freezers at the end of August. That was down 3.3% relative to 2023, and relative to the 2018 to 2022 average, down 14.4%. Bellies in particular jumps out of the report this week. Bellies at 25.6 million pounds. That's down a little more than 30% relative to what we had in August of a year ago.
Do I need to be worried about what's going on with bacon?
I'm not sure it's time yet, but when you talk about 25 million pounds of bellies in freezers, that doesn't give us a lot to fall back on if we somehow end up short in terms of slaughter as we go forward. I don't think that's where we go in terms of hog slaughter for the remainder of the year, but it's certainly worth paying attention to.
I don't think I'm going to see a relief at the grocery store in terms of bacon prices anytime soon.
I would agree. I think we can talk about those prices that will stay high, maybe not keep climbing higher. Is the part of that that's the positive if you're trying to buy bacon.
All right, quarterly hogs and pigs out yesterday as well. As we take a look at this, fairly close to pre-report expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. If we start with kept for breeding numbers, we came in at 97.8% of a year ago. That was, gosh darn, on top of almost the pre-report midpoint. So there wasn't a lot of surprise there of smaller breeding inventory. Kept for marketing in total came in at 100.7% of a year ago. That also was right on top of pre-report estimates. So neither of those kind of top level numbers suggest that we ended up with a report that was contrary to what folks thought going in. However, if we dig a little bit deeper, I think one of the big issues here is both the 120 to 179 and the greater than 180 pound weight categories for market hog inventory. So the actual for 120 to 179 was 103.5% of a year ago. The mid, and that's outside of the upper end of the pre-report estimates. And the greater than 180 came in at 104.8, which is almost 2.5% outside of the upper end of the pre-report estimates. So suggesting we got a lot of heavier weight hogs needing to come to market here in the next couple of months. I'm curious whether slaughter bears out what we got out of the hogs and pigs report, but that's one for us to watch for sure.
I would assume if we're going to see some more hogs coming to market in the next few months, that would put a little bit potential pressure on what producers are feeling. But how does this outlook, as you're looking ahead, what are you seeing as we go into Q4 and Q1 of 2025 in terms of the health or the potential for the hog industry?
Yeah, so I've used this term too often, but I say sideways when asked about where I see things going. Are we going to get some larger slaughter runs here in the last part of 2024? I think the answer is yes. Are they going to be as large as implied by what we got out of quarterly hogs and pigs? I hope not, is the answer I would give back to that. So I do think you and I talk price risk management all the time. I think the report should make folks at least think about what that downside might look like as we finish 2024. We kind of continue to, so when we look at pig crop, all right, so pig crop June through August, not a record, but close to a record despite a breeding inventory that's far from a record. And so this idea that productivity's continued to help us, I think just reminds us to say that continues, albeit maybe slower than we've seen for the past few quarters. And so I think that sets in motion really what's happening on the hog side of this equation of productivity grows enough that we can't really see a reduction in pork production because we're just more productive in front of us. I guess we want to always be more productive. I don't want to act like that's necessarily a negative thing, but I think getting tight enough supplies to make hog prices go much higher probably isn't what we got out of this report this week.
That ability to increase production efficiency is almost remarkable when you think about the liquidation that's happened, the pullback in the breeding herd in general. Like, just it is impressive to know that we're still able to meet all of our supply needs. I feel like demand globally is going to be a big part of the profitability picture for the hog industry moving forward.
So absolutely, trade's always a big part of that. I think when you look back at domestic disappearance, we don't see a lot of variability in domestic disappearance. So the strength in export demand could be very important. I think it's interesting when you see the breeding inventory and what's been happening to it. We just look state by state for a minute. So SEP 1 of this year relative to SEP 1 of a year ago, Minnesota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania, the four states that show the largest increase, all of them up 10,000 head. On the other side, Iowa down 70, North Carolina down 20, Indiana down 20, Illinois down 20. Just reminds me that we're continuing to see some, I would say, different distribution of breeding inventory as you look state by state today.
Scott, that's all we have for this week. As you look ahead to next week, we're going to look a little bit more on the domestic demand side of things, restaurant performance, jobs report. What are you watching, specifically thinking about that jobs report?
Yeah, so I think it's going to continue to be this look at these kinds of data like jobs to say what's the continued interest in cuts to interest rates going forward by the Federal Reserve. What's that jobs market look like? Is it staying slowed down? I think there's going to be a lot of people very interested in what we get for a jobs report next Friday. But that demand side, I think, is going to continue to be the critical piece as we look ahead.
Scott, always great to see you.
Likewise, Megan.
So our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning. Go to brownfieldagnews.com. You could also submit questions and comments. And for a daily rundown of what's going on in the commodity markets, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.